Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of JKL Media, your podcast where three friends sit around and talk about all kinds of things pop culture. Happy New Year. We are recording this on January 1st, and it is a book life episode. Karen, Lou, and I are all sitting here, and we've each picked 10 of the books we have read this year to discuss. So welcome to the library, Karen.
Oh, yes. I am right at home in the library. Hi, everyone.
And Lou.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year.
And your background looks like the library I would love to spend lots of time with.
The Sistine Chapel of Libraries. Yep.
Yes. We went to, multiple years ago, we went to Linda's boss's home, and she had off from her bedroom like a little hallway open closet that was nothing but bookshelves. They had this one kind of recliner chaise lounge, and I'm like, I could live there, right? It was just perfect for reading. Cool. So we are all big readers. We have actually done episodes where we have discussed different books this year. And so I thought instead of we go another series, we would go through and talk about our books. So I'll start with you, Karen. You are a voracious reader.
Correct.
You always blow away your goal. How did you narrow it down to 10?
It was very difficult. What I did is I went to the books that were on my list. I always have a sub tag that's, the year and then reading challenge. So anything I read, I mark it as read and then the reading challenge. So I clicked on that tag and I sorted it by how many stars I gave it. And I picked out some of the ones that I really like. I could write a book report almost on them. I remember them so well. So that's what I did. I don't have any particular order, but I'll pick a way to do it. And I tried to get books that I loved from all different genres, because narrowing it down to 10 would have been just terrible. So anyway, that's how I did it.
Okay. And Lou, how about you?
It's interesting that you picked this topic at this time for me, because I've been a pretty solid reader my whole life, and for me, if I read 60 books, which I know pales to what Karen reads, but for me that's a pretty good year. But I don't know, I don't think we've talked about this, but I've found that when the COVID pandemic hit, and I've had all this extra time, but I just couldn't read. I just could not read, and my reading dropped off a cliff. I don't think I read one or two books in 2019, maybe 2020, 2021. I started to come around, and I think this last year I maybe got 30 books read, which is still pretty low. But so a couple of things that have happened for me is that before, I was pretty stubborn about a book. I would read it all the way through, regardless of whether or not I was enjoying it, because I thought, well, by the time you get to the end of it, it's kind of like a TV series. You got to give it 3 or 4 episodes, and with a book, you sometimes have to give it, 3 or 4 chapters or even more. But now I find if I'm not hooked within the first couple of chapters, I stop reading it, and I had that happen half a dozen times, which is quite unusual for me. So I didn't finish a lot of books, but the books that I did read, I really did enjoy, and I tended to glom onto 1 or 2 authors. So my list is going to be very a small sample size, not just because I didn't read that many books, but because I only found a few authors that I liked that I could get through. So it's been an interesting year for me, and I have Yeah, I've only got about 3 or 4 authors on my list, and the interesting thing is that we've just done a whole series of episodes about one of those authors' books, and that was Station 11.
Mm.
Hmm. Well, I'm trying to. I think Dreamcatcher was the first book that I did not finish. I was like you, Lou. I was always someone, you have to finish a book, you have to finish a book.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Dreamcatcher, I was not enjoying, and by Stephen King. And I said, why am I doing this? And I stopped reading it. And it was like, it was freedom. Like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This, and so, and I don't know if I was just in the not right place for the book or not. So I do that sometimes too. My question is, and I use Goodreads as well. I make sure and put that I created a DNF, did not finish thing, so that I could say, okay, I don't want this to count against me, and we'll do that. So I did the same thing. I ended up doing, I always try to set my goal as 52 books, a book a week. I knowing that I'm going to cheat because Brad Meltzer, who is one of my favorite writers, does the I Am books, which are the children's book that are where he takes characters like I Am Rosa Parks, I Am Martin Luther King, I Am Jackie Robinson, and so you can read 2 of those in a day. Easy,
Sure.
when they come out. So I know that pads my count a little bit. But then also I read Under the Dome this year for the first time. I had never read it, and that took a long time. It is, because reading between things, I tend to do read between meetings and then before I go to sleep. So yeah, I tried to do a kind of rough thing too. So we'll kind of what we decided we do is not necessarily in order. We'll just go through a book, kind of talk a little bit about it, and we'll go through it. So Karen, let's start out with you.
Sure. I told Jesse earlier I'm going to be on my soapbox about this because I read a lot of romance, which people go, oh, come on. But what's the most popular Star Trek The Next Generation novel?
Imzadi.
It is Imzadi. That is straight out romance.
Yep.
And there's romance in every genre. So I like to think that, I like the mommy porn kind of romance, but I also like deep, romance that has some meat to it. So there are going to be a few of those books on my list, but I'd like to think that maybe I'll say some stuff that makes you guys want to read something in the romance genre that has a little bit of meat on the bone, as it were. So I'm going to start with The Reunion by Megan Quinn. She's one of my go-to authors. When I see she has a book out, I one click on it right away. It's definitely in the romance genre, but she writes about interpersonal relationships. This book in particular, The Reunion, it's the story of 3 siblings that return to their family home to throw their parents an anniversary party. And the 3 siblings, 2 of them are adopted, and the 2 brothers, there's 2 brothers and a sister. The 2 of them are adopted and had a traumatic past from being in so many foster homes. And then the daughter, the sister, is an oops baby that came after that, they thought they couldn't have kids. And so automatically, oops. And there are definitely some interpersonal friction moments in the book. One of the brothers runs it's an outdoors company like REI. One of the brothers runs that. It's a family company. One of the brothers, he's kind of thought of as the screw up. He does editing work as his job, but he lives close to his parents still so that he can help them with things. And the daughter is kind of like, an internet personality who does a blog and all that stuff.
Okay.
And so there are definitely some differences in their stations. One of them is a CEO, so he's all business, and he's the oldest child, the middle child syndrome, but he's taken a lot on his shoulders, and ultimately he's a little, I don't know, he feels like he was left with that job since the other two kids moved away.
Yeah.
And the daughter is at a point right now where she lived in New York, but she ended up losing a bunch of her sponsors and she can't afford her apartment. So this trip home is like, thank God I got kicked out of my apartment. I don't have any money. I'm going to go home and stay with my parents. I'm going to pretend like I'm doing a series on the Pacific Northwest. And so, brilliant. Until their parents mention that they're selling the family house. And that becomes kind of a crux of things for them, that, the brother that lives at home realizes that they can't take care of the house anymore. And so he's all for it. And the oldest brother is like, whatever, I don't like it. And the daughter, of course, she is gutted because that was her plan, to stay with them for a few months until she could get back on her feet. So it becomes this whole, there's the anniversary party planning, there's the family business, and then there's the selling of the home. And all while that is going on, while the three kids are like bickering, they get in huge fights, there are romances for each of them. And I think the romances are almost a side note, but they're really great. They're all kind of hometown romances, mm-hmm. Because the other two came home, so they're affiliated with their hometown. And it's a fantastic story. I just love reading how she writes characters and how they progress, how they grow and learn and change. And I especially like her sibling interpersonal stuff. I think she gets it. Being as someone from a family with 4 kids, I can kind of relate to that kind of. There's a big gap between me and my brothers. There's 2 brothers and 2 sisters. There's 13 years between me and my oldest brother. So I have the middle child syndrome because I did grow up in a house with people above me and below me, but they left so soon after. I also have the older child syndrome. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of this, mixed up kind of thing. And to see her write a family and seeing the dynamics and going, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. It really does kind of hit home. So I think this book is amazing for people who like character development. And there's great romances in it. It's just amazing. I think Megan Quinn is. I really do think that she stands out in a class of writers that sometimes they're cliche, but I think she really gets people and their relationships toward each other.
Super. All right. Lou, how about you?
Very cool. Well, let's get the elephant out of the room, shall we? Let's go to Stephen King.
Take a drink.
Take a drink, everybody. Stephen King. This is one of 3 King books I'll reference, but this is at least one that all 3 of us have read, and I'm sure it's the one that's got the most visibility for everybody. Is, of course, Fairy Tale, which was a very Kingian take on the whole tropes of a fairy tale type story. It's a pretty masterful weaving of a whole spectrum of go-to tropes from Cinderella to Littlest Mermaid, and at the same time he still manages to throw in some vampires and monsters. It's just a really solid and seamless tale of a protagonist that is probably the weakest part of the book, because he's not your stereotypical fairy tale hero. Even though he takes on the appearance of it, he doesn't have the all the pristine qualities of a character. He's got a mean streak in him that he has to struggle with. So it's a more nuanced character in that aspect, but it's just a really fun read. And King is an interesting place because he's so well known for horror. I think some of the more um I think maybe younger fans. I think this is a generational thing because I know a lot of guys, like I'm in my 60s, but I know a lot of people that are younger and in their 40s and that they still say King is a great writer in that, but they really want him to go back to his roots. But I think that King has written so much horror that he's just kind of outgrown it, or he's explored most of the tropes of horror as well. It's like, because he's done it all: ghosts, vampires, werewolves. That I think it's hard for him to go back to doing old stuff. He's always trying new things, even though he might be repeating story elements. But I mean, every artist does that, so it's not unusual. But I still think that he's our version of he's the 21st century version of Mark Twain, and everything that he puts out. He's the only writer that I read where the words disappear, and I know I don't feel like I'm reading. I just feel like I'm experiencing, and I just loved I really enjoyed this story. I don't think it's one of his strongest books, but it's still, to me, any King is good King. And I can't really say enough about how great of a writer I think he is.
Yeah, it is on my list. And so I will I'll take my turn to talk about fairy tale. I love this book. We did a whole episode talking about it. I think it is really well done. It is almost two novels in one. And we talked about how much we enjoyed the first part that is in the actual quote unquote real world compared to in the fairy tale world. It is a epic tale. I love that our main lead is a flawed character, but not in a way that you dislike him. He feels human and therefore has flaws. And it is, we get a quote unquote happy ending, but we don't get a sappy happy ending. I am a big, and I want to address Karen, I am a big Hallmark movie fan guy. And so I love certain romance novels and Happy Ever After. And so I definitely have, as I'm making notes, the reunion is something that I will add to my to read list in 2023.
Awesome.
And I just think that take a drink, people go back, why isn't Bruce Springsteen just doing Darkness on the Edge of Town? Or why doesn't he do Born to Run Again, those albums? And the idea is he's done that. Why? No, he could. There's no way you can go back and do that because I've done that already.
Plus, they're not the same person anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, Robert Parker, who did the Spencer novels, before his passing, there was every year you got a new Spencer novel, and it truly was almost fill in the blanks. I mean, you knew what was going to happen, and there's a comfort to it, but it is, I think some people say things about the Reacher novels. They're kind of, there is a pattern to them, and there is an enjoyment to that. I love the idea that Stephen King is pushing his boundaries and pushing the stories he wants to tell. And at this point, I will do the same thing as I say about Bruce Springsteen, right? Or Tom Hanks as an actor. Do whatever you want to do. You have given us so much entertainment. You've given us so much joy. Do the story you want to tell. And, we may like it, we may not like it, but that's okay because, we have all these other books. From my end, I think The Dead Zone will always be my favorite Stephen King book. It was the first one I read. I think it's one of his most poignant. But Fairy Tale was the stand as a fairy tale. I mean, it is just a really great novel. And so I really appreciate it. Karen, any thoughts on Fairy Tale? And then it's your turn again.
Yeah, I gotta say it would have been in my top 10 as well, but I knew you guys would be covering it, so I picked 10 other books.
That's a good cheat, right?
Yeah. No, it really was. I gave it 5 stars, and I loved discussing it. It was the best of both worlds. I'd like to think that he is like Lovecraft crossed with Mark Twain.
Oh yeah, that's really I like that a lot.
Yeah,
Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah,
there you go. Yeah, all 3. Let's put them all together because we have the thriller, we have the horror, and then we have the just storyteller of our time. And I out of all the books I read this year, Fairy Tale is definitely up there for me. Very up there for me.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. I picked 10 other books, but know that it would have been in my top 10. But I just knew that one of you would pick it.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So
next,
my turn. I'm going to go with The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is a fantastic book. It is, it's listed under a million things in the genre department: romance, contemporary, chick lit, new adult, fiction, and it's also under fantasy / science fiction. Romance is not the first genre it is. There is not much in there, but it is definitely kind of like an X-Men meets what is that show on Apple Plus that we like so much?
Severance.
Yeah, Severance. Okay. The main character is kind of a pencil pusher, and he gets summoned to this island to investigate what's going on. And it just so happens that there's a man who's kind of like Professor X, that he takes children with special abilities under his care. Special abilities are not allowed in this culture. So the kids all have different powers, and they're kind of rapscallions. When this new guy comes to visit, they play pranks on him, and he's really buttoned up and all about the job, until, of course, they worm their way into his heart, and he understands that these abilities aren't bad, that his mindset is going to be changed because the kids are good kids. The Professor X kind of guy is a good guy, that he's just trying to do right by these children. And it kind of reminds me of the Psychor thing, that there's, a guy who's willing to go against the grain in order to save these children from whatever fate they might have. And I really, really loved the dynamic between the characters. It was, I don't know, it was really great. The kids were all very fleshed out. Linus, who is the pencil pusher, if you can't guess from his name, his growth throughout the book is, it seems like he is becoming more and more fulfilled, where his life was kind of gray as a pencil pusher. I also liked that there were some absurd things in the book. His company, he was summoned by, and it's in the description, extremely upper management, and that's the name of the floor that he goes to in order to get this summons. So it's really cool. I like that, the dude's name is Parnassus. So, you can see already there's going to be some whimsy to it. It's just, I loved it. I love the fancifulness of it. The showing how people are maligned for what they feel and what they think. There's a strong LGBT community presence in this, and I think it was meant to show that like people who are another color or another sexual orientation are, trod upon by certain people, certain groups. And it was just very cool, written in a kind of a young adult way, but strong enough to appeal to anyone, really. So, and that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. Klune.
Very nice. And just as a side note, I am creating an Amazon wish list that will be open, and I will link everyone out so that they can find these books.
Oh,
so,
awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. So Lou, how about you? Number 2.
Okay, so I'm going to clump together a couple of books here because we've already talked about one in depth, and that was Station 11 from Emily St. John Mandel. And I just discovered her last year. And so I read Station 11, which is about a pandemic that predated COVID. So it was just timely for her that came out. And I think we all experienced through the TV series the style of storytelling that she tells is very intricate and subtle. And the relationships between characters, how they can impact people down the line. Her storytelling is often involves time jumping from past, present, and future. So she does a masterful job of showing how the smallest thing in the past can have an impact over the person's course of their life. And Station 11 did that fantastically. But I actually think the following up book I read by her, which is called Sea of Tranquility, is even better. And it's a time travel novel. So, and it was funny because me and Jesse were talking, and Karen were talking about the new Quantum Leap before we started recording this morning. So this one, again, she's kind of got like that Stephen King metaverse going. So there's some characters from other books that are referenced tangentially in this story, but it's just... but I can see her growth as a reader because one of the things I commented on the Station 11 novel was it probably it's just more of a literary choice, but a lot of the threads in that story were left open or dangling for you, whereas in the TV adaptation they close a lot of those loops. And Sea of Tranquility, she does that very thing. She closes a lot of these loops, which I've made it for me a much more satisfying read. And because it's a time travel story, some of those loops are pretty fantastic. So it spans from the early 1900s to all the way up to the 25th century to the moon colony, and the impact of these characters going all the way through all these different timelines. There's even a tangential reference to the pandemic. One of the characters from the moon base writes a novel about a pandemic. So that's pretty cool. And there's a character in this book that's referenced in Station 11, but which is the author of Station 11. She gets her own story in oh geez, I can't remember the name of the book now. Just let me call it up here. Sorry. Miranda. She gets her story fleshed out in The Glass Hotel. I didn't like that one as much, so it's not even on my list, because ultimately I just don't find that character's story that interesting compared to everybody else, because she creates the graphic novel that sparks everything, but other than that, she's kind of a loner character, so she's not that interesting, whereas these other ones all have these relationships with each other. But so I would highly recommend Sea of Tranquility. If you liked either the book or the series, Station 11, I'm pretty sure you're going to love Sea of Tranquility. And it got to me a couple of times. I got teary-eyed a few times, so it's really well done.
That happens to me so much when I'm reading. I just get so absorbed into it.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm gonna stick with your theme, and I read, this was one of the first books I read of the year, and it was called The Many Lives of Jimmy Lawton. And it was written by Dave Thomas. Yes, that Dave Thomas.
Awesome.
And Max, yes,
Canadian
and
Dave
Max,
Thomas. Wow.
yeah, and Max Allen Collins, who is a very well-known mystery writer, wrote The Road to Perdition, the miniseries that the book was based on. And this is Quantum Leap meets Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh.
Okay.
That movie. So the premise is this guy, Jimmy, starts flipping through other lives. He is a boxer, he is a priest, he is a different things, and each of them he remembers, but no one else, everyone thinks he is this version of the Jimmy. He is a low-level crook, and it goes through back and forth. The whole book is him just going from one life to another, trying to figure out, and each life seems even crappier at other times. It's a funny book. It's a clever book. It was a very quick read. I really, really liked them. We just talked about Quantum Leap. I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once over this holiday break. And if you guys don't know, it is a movie that basically the owner of a laundromat, it turns out, has to save the universe in all this different parallel universes. It's a very crazy movie. And I really, really enjoyed this book. I was very happy with it. And this will probably be one that I will reread this year just to kind of enjoy that a lot. So Many Lives of Jimmy Lawton, Dave Thomas, Max Allen Collins, a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'm looking up some of these books as we talk about them.
Yeah.
And that cover.
Yeah.
That is an awesome cover. I like it.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I'm putting it on my want to read list. I mean,
yeah, it is a great cover. It shows, it is just this images and factures. And so, yeah, I really like this. And Max Allen Collins is a great mystery writer. And to Dave Thomas doing this together was a lot of fun.
Wow.
It's very cool.
I'm surprised you even know who Dave Thomas is.
Come on.
Hey, SCTV?
Yeah.
I love it.
I watched SCTV way back when.
Okay,
I love
awesome.
all of them.
Yeah. Good day, eh?
Hey, good day, eh? Yes. Played Bob Hope and all this others. Yes. So
yeah.
Awesome.
All right, Karen. Yes.
I've already put my goal in for this year, which is, you guys know, it's super high.
Yeah.
So to put all these on my want to read list is really giving me a nice boost at the beginning of the year. So awesome. That is one that I will read this year.
That is actually what I'm doing too, is while we're putting this so I can have this good. All right. Hey, so just to cook things up, Lou, how about you give a third?
Okay. Another change that has been happening in my reading habits, and this predates the pandemic, is growing up, I was a big SF fantasy horror reader, but I don't know if it's just a hardening of my mental arteries or whatever, but I find it harder and harder to get into science fiction and fantasy novels, and I'm much more interested in grounded stories that take place in the real world. So I've started to gravitate towards thrillers more often than not. And one of the ones that I quite enjoyed was the book, and I'm trying to find it here on my list. Why is it not showing up? I've got it on my other list. That is When You Are Mine by Michael Robotham. And he is a a mystery thriller writer that I really enjoyed. I haven't read a lot of his books, but this one was very interesting. It's about a police officer who arrives at the scene of a domestic assault, and she rescues a woman that's been beaten, who turns out to be the mistress of a decorated detective. And of course, because of that, the whole thing is hushed up, and she's making enemies with powerful friends. So she strikes up a friendship with this woman, and it just it's just one of those interesting detective stories where the tension between her and all these established detectives it's quite a tense story, and you just don't know if she's going to be able to navigate all the machinations of the department bureaucracy and all these government links and that. And I just this guy has a real good command of the English language, and he's got a blurb from Stephen King on the cover, so which is one of the reasons why I read it, because King often recommends books on his Twitter feed, so I always give them a try. And yeah, this guy's a good writer. I unfortunately I read this early in 2022, so the details of it are not clear to me, but I do remember enjoying it quite a bit, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So it's he's got quite a few books. He used to be an investigative journalist, and he covered the serial killings of Fred and Rosemary West and other similar cases. So, he's got a good clinical and forensic knowledge of how crimes are approached in that. So it's he's got a couple of series, and he's won quite a few awards. So I highly recommend checking him out.
Well, good. All right, Karen,
Awesome.
how about you?
That one's actually already on my Kindle.
Oh,
So
really?
I will be reading that this
Cool.
year.
Yeah, I have not, but I will. I'm adding it to my to read list. Yes.
Awesome. So I was gonna just go along with the timey-wimey thing. I'm gonna shout out to See You Yesterday by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is one that I actually recommended to Jesse last year. I adored this book. It's kind of like science fiction mashed up with like a teenage angst kind of thing. There are new college students. The girl, there's a girl and a boy protagonist. There's other characters in it, but the girl has done some stuff out of character for her. She's kind of a hot mess. She goes out to a party and she ends up setting the sorority house on fire. And she goes back to her dorm and kind of hunkers down and is like, I hope they don't catch me. And she wakes up and it's the same day again. So kind of giving her a chance to start over. And each day she goes to this class in the morning. It's her first class of the day. And she kind of notices that there's a boy in the front row that's given off some weird vibes. And she, talks to him, and they realize that they're both doing the same thing, except this guy has been doing it for longer. So that's why he notices that she's kind of in that same kind of loop, and he has resigned himself to the fact that he's just not going to ever get out of it. He's tried lots of things already. But working together, they find a way to every day kind of work out a theory and why it's happening, and how they can get out of it. They go talk to a professor that has some knowledge in this. Of course, she doesn't remember each day that they've gone to talk to her. And they also decide they're going to kind of take cues from each other, that this guy is very straight-laced, has his pens at a right angle to his papers. He's very regimented, and she is, like I said, a hot mess. So she kind of lives on the fly, and they decide they're going to take cues from each other and kind of live each day with something some goal in mind of being different than what they were before they started this loop. So she takes him places that he wouldn't go, and he takes her places that she wouldn't go. It's a very cool novel where it shows kind of a coming of age plus time travel, which I just really loved this book. It was light and airy while being also it had stakes in it. So I think it's a very cool book. It's not the deepest of books, but again, I think one of the common threads you're going to see in the books that I pick out is that there's a progression in the main characters. There's a very profound progression in both of these characters. So that's why I picked this one. And Rachel Lynn Solomon, very good writer. She's written a book about radio talk shows. She's written a book about like TV weather people, and it's just she seems to write books about stuff that you can relate to, college students, people that are in the media, stuff like that. It's very cool. She's a good writer. And I like that one of the genres in this is magical realism, and that I would definitely firmly put it in that category.
So I had purchased that in June, but somehow in the shuffle have not read it yet. So it's on my Kindle, right? So yeah, that will be one to do. All right.
Awesome.
So speaking of alternate timelines, 3 More Months by Sarah Ashavari. My note was, would you wrap up loose ends if you get the chance? This is, I guess you would kind of do, this is kind of a family romance drama. Our main character is very busy, has no time for her mother, and she gets the word that her mother has died. And then she wakes up and her mother is alive. She goes back 3 months and her mother is alive. And the whole novel is, well, is this real? Is this a dream? What do we do? And it gives you, this is certainly not groundbreaking, but it is very satisfying that the idea, and once again, because I love Quantum Leap, fixing things that were wrong. You have a chance to do a do-over, and do you fix it? I found it very satisfying. I think the ending, while not sappy, was comforting. And so I liked this one a lot for that kind of idea of, once again, trying to being able to fix things that we all have regrets. And this is a novel that says, okay, well, what if you had the chance? What would you do? All right. Good.
Cool.
All right. I will go next, and then we'll start. So my fairy tale would probably be, would either be 1 or 2, but my number 1 novel was Random by Penn Jillette. I am a huge Penn and Teller fan. I listen to his podcast every week. He does 2 episodes a week. Have just adored him. And this book is crazy. He has talked about in interviews that several years ago, they were going to do a show in the UK, and they ended up getting a producer that was way above where they should qualify for. She was incredibly prestigious, and they probably shouldn't have had her produce the show. And as they were talking, she talked about she lives dice life. And the idea is, if you are not sure what to do, you roll dice, and the dice, you do what the dice tell you to do. And she says, I rolled a 7. So that's why I'm producing y'all's TV show. And the premise is the main character is almost 21. His father owes an incredibly like $500,000 of money to a loan shark. The loan shark says, if you do not pay me by your 25th birthday, I will kill your father, I will kill your mother, I will kill your sister, and then I will kill you. And through various circumstances, he ends up being able to pay the debt involved with dice. And he decides that he will now, his God is the dice. And so any decision that he is not sure about what he wants to do, he assigns a arrangement to, do I want to sleep with one person? Do I want to sleep with two people? Do I want to sleep with a male? Do I want to sleep with a female? Do I want to sleep with a male and a female? Do I want to sleep with two female? Assigns numbers, roll the dice, and then that's what he does. It is a bizarre book. It is some of the real characters involved with, like Piff the Maggot Dragon is in it. Johnny Thompson, who was Penn's mentor. And it is set right before the pandemic happened. A really, really unique novel that I loved a lot. So I recommend that really strongly if you want to have a untraditional story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's very satisfying, but it is a weird way to run your life. And but I loved the book.
Cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Lou, how about you?
I'm going to go back to King, but this time it's my only nonfiction book in the list. So Jesse, I'm just popping up the original book, which is the Stephen King Illustrated Companion. That came out in 2010, I believe. Yep. And then there was a follow-up book that is and this title is a bit of a doozy. So just let me make sure I get it all properly put out here. Where is it gone now? Or did I lose it? Shoot. Oh, here we go. Okay. So it's Stephen King, a complete exploration of his work, life, and influences. So this is a book that's written by Bev Vincent. It's a coffee table book. It's full of photographs, and it's also like an autobiography of Stephen King. And it's the follow-up to the other book that I mentioned. And I know Karen has both of these books, I believe.
Yep, I do.
And the thing about the first book, if you can get it, the Illustrated Companion, there's two editions. And if you can get the first edition, it's got these really cool reproduction pullouts that come in these little fold-out pouches that are like, Xerox copies of King's early writings from when he was doing school newspapers with his brother and so forth, and his early drafts of handwritten notes of some of his early stories and that. So if you get the first edition of that, that's fantastic. If not, because this book is out of, they've not printed new printings for quite a while. The second printing, all these reproductions are incorporated right into the book, but so you kind of miss that little bit of tactile feel that you get with the first printing. But his follow-up book, the complete exploration of Stephen King's works, is also pretty cool. It's broken down by this King's life, starting from his childhood in the 50s and 70s to 70s, and then his writing career in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And there's a lot of cool facts about what was going on in King's life at any given time when he wrote a particular book. Plus, it's full of a lot of rarely seen photographs that you don't get to see. There's a lot of material or media of King out on the web, but these books always have shots of King that you don't see anywhere else. And it's written in a very approachable style. If you're somebody that wants to find out a lot about King in a very short, condensed way. This is the perfect way to do it, and it's just a fun coffee table book to pick up and flip through and look at pictures. So yeah, highly recommend this. I interviewed Bev back in September on the Writers Podcast, so you can check that out there. A little shameless self plug that I've done an interview with Bev, and we talk about this book quite a bit. So yeah, check it out. It's if you're a King fan, it's almost a required item, I would think.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, and Bev has written a lot of like almost Cliff Notesy kind of books about Stephen King novels. He's written a trivia book. He's written a lot of other stuff. So, I mean, look him up if you're into learning more.
He's
about
also
him.
written a Dark Tower Companion, which is sort of like a condensed encyclopedia of all the people, places, and themes of the Dark Tower series.
Yeah, he's a good resource, I think.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So I believe it's your turn, Karen.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go with In 5 Years by Rebecca Serle. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Serle. It's another time travel-y kind of book. It's more in the realm of someone sees into their own future and isn't quite sure how it's going to end up that way. The main character has a dream one night, and it's incredibly detailed, and it, from what she can see of like some of the landmarks around her, it's 5 years from then. And she thinks, okay, that's fun. That's a fun little dream I had, until she meets one of the people that she didn't know before, but is in her dream. And then she realizes, okay, what was that all about? She doesn't quite understand what's going on, but the relationship that she and this other character it's nothing like what is in 5 years. They're both married to other people. They should just know each other, on the surface, and things happen that kind of she doesn't want to happen. She doesn't like this future scenario and where it's headed. But she feels like when things start happening that kind of slot into this, well, this would make it easier. This is something that happened. She kind of tries to reconcile, well, it might happen. And at some point, she draws this person into her thoughts and, tries to talk to him about it and says, how can we stop this? And it turns out that the dream, it happens exactly how she has it, but there's so much happening underneath that it's just a completely different experience. Like what she hears is what she hears, but it's in a totally different context. What's happening to her actually happens to her, but it's not how she thinks it's going to be. So I really liked that they gave her this ability to see 5 years in the future, to kind of see it coming down Main Street at her, and they turned it upside down, that they made you realize, okay, you can see things from a million different perspectives. And when she thought something was going to happen, something didn't happen that way. It made me cry a lot. It's got a lot of angst in it, some loss, definitely. So I would give it that kind of trigger warning. If you're not into reading books about loss and things like that, then stay away. But there's time travel. It's also under the heading magical realism, and I don't know. It feels like it's grounded in the real world, but with this little touch of whimsy in it that becomes a very deep plot point. So I dug that one a lot.
Yeah. I don't remember if you recommended it or if someone else recommended it. And I mentioned I read this somehow and you were involved with it. And I agree. a really interesting book that the way they stuck the landing was surprising.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was okay. I
It
didn't
is. It's like
expect
a
that.
twist,
Yeah.
but it's a twist that you've already seen.
Yeah.
It's very weird, but it's
Yeah.
satisfying.
Yeah. All right, Lou, how about number 5 for you?
Um, so I haven't totally abandoned science fiction. So
Yay.
I did read, I believe it's the first book in a trilogy, and it's called Outpost by Michael Gear. And it's a story about a colony of a stranded colony. They've landed on this planet, and their technology has caused their ship to malfunction, so they're basically stranded there, and they're off the beaten path, so to speak. So that when the follow up team comes, they're not even expecting survivors, and this world is harsh. Like it's like a hell planet. You know, every life form there is out to kill people in that, and it's just a really fast paced, fun tale. It's the planet is called Donovan. It's it's a mixed bag. It's got it's rich in raw materials in that, but it's full of really deadly life forms and so forth. And so there's this whole tension between the survivors, because they're constricted out by this corporation, and they're under contract. And as far as the corporation is concerned, everything that they've done belongs to the corporation. But these people feel like they've earned their own life because they felt they were abandoned in that. So there's a lot of tension going on between these opposing parties. And then there's this whole mystery about these ships are disappearing when they're returning from certain they have some sort of jump technology, warp technology, and so some of these ships are being lost, and this colony is their ship that left the planet did not complete its jump. So there's this all, there's several mysteries going on at the same time, and then you've got the tension between the corporation and the colonists, and it's it's a good yarn. It's high action, and I quite enjoyed the first book in the series, and that's Outposts by W. Michael Gear, Gear.
That sounds
Awesome.
fun. That sounds
It
like a fun
does.
series. Yeah, I like that a lot. Good. Karen, number 5
All
for you.
right. Let me go to The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is it was published in 2011, so it's not a new book. And it's a book that I saw on a lot of lists of people like, this book changed my life, that sort of thing. It didn't change my life. However, I think it is an amazing story. It's historical, it's fantasy, it's, I don't know, just a fanciful tale of this circus that it's essentially only at night. It's self-contained. People can't just come and see the circus during the day. There's like a protection around it. It's kind of a magician kind of thing, but real magic. And the whole circus is based on whatever powers the circus inhabitants have. There's two people, they're married, but they can stay still all day long. So they are live statues. That's their thing. There's a room that was set up that you can go in and have an experience, and nobody else has the same experience. You get to go to like a babbling brook with all these, flowers, but the next person might go to a cityscape. And there's all these like magical things around the circus, and people, they they go to it year after year. There's like a fan group of people that go to the circus year after year. And it's just really cool. And it kind of flips back and forth from these kids that end up kind of meeting on either side of the wall one evening, and how, you know, he has an experience with it every year. And then you see, like in the past, you see how the circus was formed. And I just think it's very cool to see what people might get from this kind of magical circus. You know, what would you take away from it? And it's just really cool. And I like that it flips back and forth so that you get to see like the background of the circus, and then you get to see its impact on people. And it's just a really cool story and I can see why it kind of, you know, impacted people so strongly. It is a very, very moving story. For me, it was pretty much just, you know, a fun ride. I've read so much science fiction and fantasy that something like this doesn't change my life, but I can see where someone who doesn't read a lot, where they would read this and it would just profoundly change their view on things. So I highly recommend it. It's The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern.
Okay. Kind of reminds me The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. That didn't make my list, but it's something I really enjoyed. Just because, you know, we had to cut it down to 10. I like this one. That sounds really interesting. So I'm going to go. How to Fake It in Hollywood by Ava Wilder.
Awesome.
It is a pure fantasy. Two actors pretending to be in love, and guess what? They end up falling in love.
Oh.
It is just a classic. It couldn't be a Hallmark movie because it's got too much naughtiness in it, but it could be a Netflix Christmas movie, except this isn't set at Christmas. You know, Love Hard and, you know, and Holiday. It was just a fun little romp. You know, one guy is considered this brooding, brilliant actor and writer who's now just you know, he's pulled himself into a hole of nothing but alcohol. The female lead was on this little a Thank God It's Friday TV show, and she wants to move into something else. And so they end up, both of their agents work out this, hey, this can, you know, do this. And so it's a silly romp, but it's really well done. It was just a fun romance tale that I enjoyed spending time with the characters. So, and I like going back and forth between meaty novels or, you know, things, and then sometimes I just love a popcorn novel that just I enjoy spending time with a character and helps me get through that. So How to Fake It in Hollywood was Ava Wilder. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it was fun. All right, Karen, you got another one for us?
We can go to Lou. He has
Okay, Luke, how about you? Yes.
Sure. I following in your vein, this was a very interesting book. It's touted as a crime drama, but when you're reading it, it's you realize that it's a fiction book. So it comes off as a nonfiction a true crime book, but it's written by Richard Chismar, who is the editor publisher of Cemetery Dance, and it's called Chasing the Boogeyman. And what he's done is he's basically done his autobiography, but married it with a story of a serial killer in his hometown, Maryland town. In the summer of 1988, he's coming back from college, and there's these serial killers are going on. These girls are being killed, and you're reading it. At first, you're thinking, okay, this is a fiction book, but then you're reading it, and it's like, but this sounds like somebody's true life story, and it is his autobiography, but he's married with this serial killer story, and then he's put in like these, like if you've I've seen like the Charles Manson book. What's that famous book? The Helter Skelter, where it's got the black and white photographs of the crime scenes and the victims, and like so they're scattered throughout this book. So you're kind of facilitating between is this real, or is this a story? And it's quite an interesting dance, and I just found it a really a unique concept and a unique blending of a fiction and nonfiction approach to storytelling that really works well.
Yeah, I'm looking at Amazon. It says "Chasing the Boogeyman: a novel." We need to remind you that even though this is that style, this sounds very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I gotta say that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Of course it's a novel. Come on.
Yeah.
Don't put that in there. I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's just irritating to me, but
all right. Karen.
All right. I'm gonna go with Autobiography by Christina Lauren. It is fiction. It's not an autobiography, it's autobiography.
Mm.
The main character in this is taking seminars about writing, and he's kind of been challenged to write this book in a semester. He has to write the entire book in the semester, and when they go to the seminar, he is bisexual, and he is struggling with that. And when he goes to the seminar, he meets what is the equivalent of a TA who he becomes fascinated with, and they strike up a friendship. And it's very interesting because the other boy, the TA, he's not bisexual. I think he's just gay. But he's also a Mormon. And there's a lot of that explored in the book, is how he has to kind of suppress who he is completely in order to still keep his faith and to be okay with his family. And there's a lot of that. And also the fact that Tanner, who's the main character, he is very much struggling with who he is. So it's like two different sides of the same coin, where they're both struggling with who they are, but for different reasons. One of them is just because of his age and the fact that he's still feeling out his romantic feelings for people. And of course, this threw him for a loop, the fact that he's attracted to both men and women. And, to a lot of people, that's not normal, but for him, that's how he is. And then the TA, it's sad to see how he has to live his life in order to fit in. And so the main character feels like if he can help him, he will. If not, he's going to take lessons from this and understand that being himself is what he needs to be. So it's definitely a coming of age thing. It's young adult fiction, what we call in the romance game YA. And there's a lot of themes explored in this that go beyond the LGBTQ aspect of it. So this was one that I really loved because of the themes that it explores, the way the two characters interact with each other, Tanner's friendships with other people, the whole family dynamic. It was just really cool to read, and it's another one that kind of made me cry. So there's that.
Nice. All right, so mine is a novella that's only available on Kindle. I think it might be available on another thing, but I don't know for sure. It's called The Orville: Sympathy for the Devil by Seth MacFarlane. What this was it was a script that they had written for the new season of The Orville. They ended up not producing it, and so he ended up converting this to a novella. It is, I don't want to spoil too much about it. It is definitely worth the $3 if you are a fan of the Orville. If you are not, you may not know the characters, but I still think it. It is basically a alternate universe story that I found very, very interesting, and the characters of the Orville do not show up till really almost the end of the book. It would have been an amazing episode, though I don't know if they could have afforded to film it. I really, really liked this short story and was very happy that they ended up putting this out. So
you're putting your books on that wish list as well?
Yes, I am. Yes, I
Awesome.
am. I'm adding all of them. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go again. So one of the things that I love is when you find a series that you get to spend time with. We just talked about sometimes that they can go through, they become kind of a trope and they're always the same thing. Robert Krass has written Elvis and Joe Pike books. Elvis is a private detective that's in Los Angeles. He has done a series of books, and the characters change. He has fell in love, he has lost people, he has grown. This is the latest book. It's like the 19th book in the series. It is always a good mystery. It's always a good, a lot of excitement. One of the things Robert does is he changes the perspective, and so the chapter will tell you whose perspective the character, the story is being told. I don't know if you haven't read any of the Elvis and Joe Pike books, you may not enjoy this as much, but if you are into a good, private eye story, Robert Krass is a great storyteller. There is a long series of books that you can start and enjoy that series, but this was the latest one, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was very happy that they are on their game. So that was it was a very happy to see.
Cool.
All right, Lou, how about you next?
Well, if you've been a fan of Michael Crichton and you're looking for his successor, and I'm pretty sure Karen's got this book on her list too, is the author Blake Crouch, probably best known for the Wayward Pines trilogy. His latest book is Upgrade, and it concerns genetic manipulation to improve the human species. It's a very fast-paced techno thriller. I quite enjoyed it. Personally, my favorite from him still remains Dark Matter, but he's done Recursion, which is about memory manipulation. Dark Matter is about quantum physics. So he's really continued the Michael Crichton theme of techno thrillers. And these are fast-paced books. The characters are not something that you're going to hang your heart on or anything like that, but they're developed enough that you care about what happens to them. And it's just like a fun, fast read, like a popcorn summer movie kind of equivalent of reading. So I highly recommend Upgrade. Quick read, lots of fun.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. It's on my list as well. I think it is super easy to read for people who might be interested in that, but they they're not sure whether it'd be too much technobabble. It's not. It's definitely a human story that comes from that kind of technological background. Upgrade is very much a man against the system kind of book. So if you want to root for the underdog and hate when people are put into situations that they don't want to be in, then this is the book for you. It's a mystery, it's dystopia, it's fantasy, it's thriller. I mean, there's a lot of different genres that fits in. And I really like that you learn so much about this character very gradually through the book. So I highly recommend it as well. I agree also that Dark Matter was his best book so far.
Yeah, I have not read anything from this guy. Would you start with this or Dark Matter?
Doesn't matter. They're all standalones.
Okay.
Except
So whichever one.
Except for the Wayward Shrine.
Well, yeah, Wayward Pines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
His books that aren't based on another property are all standalones.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I will. That's, one of the great gifts is when you find a new writer, right? And then you discover that they have, a dozen books. It's like, oh, it's this gift. Like, oh, I can mine this, do that. So, okay, good.
Yeah, I highly recommend Dark Matter too.
Okay.
So I would start with one of those two, I think.
Okay,
those
good.
are my favorite from him. Recursion, also good.
Yeah.
And that is one of your books as well? The
Yes.
Upgrade? Okay. Good.
Yes.
All right. Well, then I will give one. So I'm cheating. Lee Goldberg is a writer that has done a lot of different collections. Like he's done, those tie-in books where he will do, based on a TV series and other stuff. But he has a series of that's Eve Ronin. And the premise is that she was a sheriff's deputy. She ends up taking a celebrity who was acting the arse, and she puts him down, and they capture it on video, and she becomes this media darling. And the sheriff says, okay, and there's this huge, turns out that one of the deputy sheriffs, there's this big thing where there's all this corrupt in the sheriff's department. She is the only good thing. The sheriff says, hey, if you will help me get out of this bad hole, you can have anything you want. She goes, okay, I want to be a detective. And so they promote her to detective, and no one thinks she's earned it, which she hadn't, right? And so there's 4 stories in the series so far: Lost Hills, Bone Canyon, Gated Prey, Movie Land. They all about her. One of the things I like about this is she is not perfect. She is not one of those Mary Sue characters. She is flawed. She makes mistakes. She is her partner is an older detective that is set to retire. And you're like, oh, he's going to die. He doesn't, which was a nice surprise, right? And it's a buddy cop book series. It is definitely popcorn. It is fun. You really like the characters. I like the politics involved, that she knows she got a golden ticket and she's trying to earn it. The other deputy sheriffs actually, some of them actively fight against her. Because it's very realistic about, the sexism. So it's a fun series that I ended up buying all of them for my vacation and kind of read them all in a row. So it kind of felt like, one book. So I was like, well, instead of just picking one, I'll kind of throw them all in there. It's a fun series. I know I keep saying that, but it's just good. You're like, oh, I like these people. I like her struggle. She has a crazy mom who keeps wanting her to use her celebrity They want to do a TV series based on her. She doesn't want to do a TV series. She just wants to be a cop. And so it's a lot of fun. I recommend it strongly. Lee Goldberg, it's Eve Ronin series.
He's written a bunch of books based on Monk, the show Monk.
Yes.
Which I love. That's awesome.
Yeah. His brother is Todd Goldberg, which has done a series of novels that he did not do in this year, but Todd has been on the Set Listing Bruce podcast. He's a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, and he's done series of that are set in a gangster world where a guy ends up, he's a killer, has plastic surgery, ends up being undercover as a rabbi in Las Vegas. And he is a mobster, which is awesome. A fun series of books too. So, okay.
And he's written a bunch of books based on Burn Notice.
Yes, exactly.
Another USA property.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'll definitely put that on my list.
All right. So Karen, how about you?
All right. I'm going to go with another young adult, but it's pretty much a straight romance with some angst thrown in. It's called The Starburst Effect by Kelly Oram. I had to find it on my list. Sorry. It's a book about a high school. He's a junior when this happens. He plays football and he gets taken down really hard and he suffers a traumatic brain injury. And they call it colloquially the Starburst Effect. And it's that he doesn't remember much. He kind of gets these images of things that happened before, but he is a completely different person. And he befriends the girl next door, and she just happens to be a girl that he bullied in his prior life. But he needs her to get through. He's slower than he used to be, so he's not quite as, the straight A student, the golden boy. He needs help reading things, understanding things. And so she is his guide. And he kind of ends up in her shoes where, and he's the one that actually made her nickname, her bullied nickname. He's like the ringleader of bullying her before this happens. And he ends up becoming that person. His old group, the cheerleaders, the team, they want to disassociate him. He's slow. He's not our guy anymore. So they bully him. And he, without remembering what he did to the girl, he gets this understanding of what he did. So seeing them grow closer and seeing her begrudgingly help him. I mean, she doesn't want to help him in the beginning. Why would you? So, seeing how they strike up this really cool friendship, and it turns into a little bit more than that. I mean, it's in high school, so there's a stopping point where you get a happily ever after, but it's high school, so
sure.
But it's really interesting to see this kind of bullying thing turned on its head, where the guy realizes from what this girl says that he was the bully and now he's being bullied, and there's just a very cool dynamic between the two where they learn. This is one of my themes. They learn something from each other and they change because of it. So I really like it. I like how they make him a character that you could easily hate, but they make him very sympathetic in this, and not just because of his injury, but because he's learning about himself and about what's wrong and right. And so if you have any kind of, relationship to bullying, any kind of relationship to, being the bully in high school. I know a lot of people regret how they acted in high school. It's an easily understood book, and there's a lot of really cool moments between the two.
It reminds me a little of that regarding Henry, right? The Harrison
Yeah.
Ford.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's that kind of injury. Yes,
Ooh,
exactly.
I like that. That sounds like a fun premise.
Mhm.
All right, Lou.
Alrighty. Well, this is my third and final Stephen King book, and it was actually a collaboration with somebody I've also mentioned before, which is Richard Chismar. And this is a trilogy. The first book was called Gwendy's Button Box, and Karen just read that. So the second book was called Gwendy's Magic Feather, and the final book is called Gwendy's Final Task. And Karen, if I told you that you could subtitle this story Gwendy Goes to Space, how would you take that?
I would be on it. I mean, I'm already going to read the next two books because that's our deal is I'm going to read this trilogy.
Right.
I was already intrigued and I love that description. I'm in.
This is a story about a young girl in Castle Rock, and originally Stephen King had written a story, but he couldn't figure out how to end it. And through circumstances, Richard Chismar was able to collaborate with him and finish the story. But it's basically about the premise is that there's this button box, that magic box that has buttons on it that, depending on how you use it, can cause great harm or great good. And it also has an addictive element to it that Gwendy has to fight throughout her life with. And this all comes to a head in the third book, and I can't get into much more details than that because I don't want to ruin it for Karen. But there are towers, there are ties into the Dark Tower, and the button box has been the blame of many things, and in this particular installment, it's even blamed for the COVID pandemic because of one proprietor's misuse of the box, and I'll leave that to you to guess who that is. But it's an interesting story that starts out very small in the original book, and this leap into the third book and this ties into the overall Dark Tower mythology was not something that I was expecting to this extent. So it's quite a touching tale, I think, and I learned a new literary device, and that is Chekhov's scorpion.
Nice.
So
very nice.
I'll leave it there.
Oh, okay. That's adding to my list for sure. I love that. All right, so we are down to our last two, right? I think if I counted correct.
Yep.
All right, so I'll go next. This is Sarah Goodwin Confino wrote a book years ago, Beyond the Palace, which was her first book. She ended up self-publishing it, then she ended up getting published by a mainstream publisher. It is all about a couple falling in love during a Bruce Springsteen tour. Yeah.
Take a drink.
Yeah. Romantic comedy set in a Springsteen. Could this be any more in my wheelhouse? And I truly loved the story. We exchanged a few emails. She actually sent me, her college professor said, I don't like the ending. I want an ending. And so she sent me like a ending she wrote for him. So she's written a couple other books. She got a 3-book deal. She has a third one coming out this year, but She's Up to No Good is the book that she came out this year. We've talked about this before. A granddaughter goes on a road trip. The granddaughter, her husband says, hey, I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. We cut to 6 months later. She's living at her parents' house, doing nothing but wallowing in pity. And her grandmother says, we need to go back to where I grew up as a girl. And the story is set in modern times, and then flashbacks to during the 40s when her grandmother was a teenage girl, growing up Jewish and falling in love with a Hispanic Catholic boy. We get both storylines. It is absolutely adorable. You really like the characters. The grandmother is one of those that, is a pistol, and this kind of I can drive. No, you can't, Grandma. And so it's just a really entertaining story about them, her forcing her granddaughter to get out of herself and to start phase 2 of her life. So she's up to no good. Sarah Goodwin Confino. Sarah is promised me that she will be on the podcast at Leslie Bruce this year. We have gone back and forth. She is a massive Springsteen fan. And so I'm looking forward to having her talk about her books and her love of Springsteen. So this is one that I just adore. And I think if you like light literature and, kind of a romance and also a family story, you'll enjoy this one.
Yeah, that's on my Kindle as well.
Good.
That book.
Good. All right. All right. So how about Lou? How about you go next?
All righty. So again, I'm going to jump off a point that you made earlier, Jesse, about discovering a writer that you were not familiar with before, and then finding out that they have a whole bunch of books for you to read. And that would be the American-Irish writer Tanya French. She writes, or Tana, I'm not sure because there's no Y in it, so I always find that I trip over it, but I think it's Tana French, and she writes mystery thrillers, and her first 6 books deal with the fictional Dublin Murder Squad. And I believe the first book, In the Woods, was made into a BBC series a couple of years ago. But she writes stories where the conceit is that she'll start, like in her first novel, she starts out with a couple of main protagonists, and then you have in the background like a subordinate character. And then in the next book, that subordinate character becomes the main character of the next book. And so it kind of rotates through this Dublin Murder Squad. And she just writes so if you read murder thrillers, mystery thrillers to try to solve the crime, these books might not be your total cup of tea, because she's really much more interested in the relationships between the detectives and their backgrounds and what it brings to the cases that they're investigating, and how it either mirrors or complicates what they're trying to do. And then there's all the politics of this Dublin Murder Squad. Every cop in Ireland wants to get on this on this squad. It's the prestige thing, and so it's a very closed, tight-knit group, and they don't allow or look favorably upon newcomers coming into the squad. They're very judgmental on that, and these characters are very flawed. It's some people might find it a little too bleak, a little too dark, but I just love the psychological tensions and contortions that all these detectives are going through. And it's much less about the crime solving and then the relationships of these cops. And she's got like 6 books in these series. I would highly, I really loved the 5th one, which was called The Secret Place. And that's where these 2 detectives are investigating in the murder of there's like these 2 separate schools. One's for all boys school, and another one's an all girls school, which are within relatively close proximity to each other, but a boy is discovered murdered on the grounds of the girls' school. And so the story in that particular book flips between the 2 detectives that are working the case and the girls from the school, and and the boys to a lesser extent. She just creates 2 sets of amazing characters and relationships that she doesn't deal with it to the same extent in other stories, because it's much more of a an adult kind of setting. It's usually a husband-wife murder kind of thing, whereas with this one, with this totally different age group of characters, it's just masterful how she creates these such realistic characters, and the lengths that they will go to protect each other, especially the girls, because at that age, and you're in a private school, and there's this,
Sure.
they're all this one group of girls are kind of like the outcasts of the school, and they hang together, and they're very tight in that. She's just a fantastic writer. She's been a recent discovery of mine. I think I only found out about her about 2 years ago. But man, she just writes characters so well. I just love everything that she's done so far. Her last book was called The Searcher, and that's a standalone. Well, it was a standalone, but it was about a divorced Chicago cop who wants to get away from it all and start over. So he moves to Ireland, and he moves out like in the boonies, and so he's got this whole dynamic where he's trying to fit in with the people there, and because it's out in the rural thing, and everybody knows everybody, and so it's very tight knit. And but one of the villagers comes to him because their brother is missing, and they want him to find him. So yeah, now there's going to be a follow-up to that. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough of her. She does really deep psychological character studies, and I just think she's a fantastic writer, and I highly recommend that you check out her books.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit, as I'm adding it to the list, it talked about that, one of the main characters has a history, right? Without spoiling anything, reminded me of what didn't make my list, but I don't know if either one of you have read any Harlan Coben, but
my wife's into him. Yeah.
Yeah, The Boy from the Woods is the story. Wild was someone who they ended up finding him. He had lived alone in the woods for years, and there's 2 books in that series so far that kind of you're discovering the history of him doing that. So that's good. I definitely will check out at least one book of this series and see if it's my taste, because I love the idea of having all this to discover.
Mm-hmm.
Great choice.
My reading sister.
Yeah.
Her name is Amanda. I've known her for quite some time. We met through her husband. And she's one of our writers now on staff at Pro Podcast Solutions. She and I discuss books a lot, and we talked about this Into the Woods, the first book in that series. And so it's on my want to read list. And now hearing you guys talk about it, I'm interested.
I would highly recommend The Secret Place, which is book 5. I mean, the books are connected to each other kind of, but it's not like you'll be lost because the cases are standalone. But in The Secret Place, like I said, because it's got this mix of these 2 different age groups, she just does a masterful job with that. And her other standalone is The Witch Elm, which is also a very, very good book. She's very interesting because when you're reading her books, you kind of know, okay, I'm pretty sure that this is the murderer, but when you get to that point and when it's revealed, that's not the big deal of the book. So they're really, either it'll appeal to you or not, or it won't. But I just find the way she writes these characters, they're all so broken, and you feel bad for all of them.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Very nice. All right, Karen.
Okay, I'm going to go with Shipwrecked, where I don't think this is the strongest book in this series. It's just the one I read this year. It's part of the Spoiler Alert trilogy from Olivia Dade. And there's a reason it's named that. That there's Spoiler Alert, there's, I can't remember the middle one. And then the last one is Shipwrecked. Ship as in shipping. I'm shipping 2 characters from the show. It's about this group of people that are on a Game of Thrones type show. And it's kind of a wink and a nod to the fact that people really hate the last season of Game of Thrones. The writers of the series have gone a direction that all of these people hate. And not only do they have like a text chain between the group, and they're complaining about it. What can we do about it? Can we really, undermine it? Can we tell fans that we're not on board with the direction this goes without, breaking our what do you call it? when you're not allowed to talk about something. I can't remember.
Non-disclosure.
Yes,
NDA.
non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's like Game of Thrones where people ask them, so what's going to happen? I can't say, I'm under an NDA.
Yeah.
They're definitely under that. They would really love to kind of show the fans what's really happening. In the first book, spoiler alert, the main character kind of finds all this fan fiction about him. And he realizes, well, this would be a way for me to give out my version of what I want to happen. And so he ends up becoming really close friends with one of the girls that writes fan fiction. And of course, she doesn't know that he's one of the characters on the show, that he's like the main character on the show. And there's a whole thing about them meeting, and I don't want to meet, and all this stuff. The second book is about another of the stars, the one that is the rebel. He actually goes to a convention and kind of lets loose on the creators of the show and ends up getting in trouble. So he has to have a minder. So that's the second book. And then Shipwrecked is the story of two characters that their storyline is separate from all the other storylines. They are actually two Viking-like characters that end up getting stranded on this island. And it's like a little group of people that end up going to this island for months at a time, being cut off from everyone, kind of, becoming their own family. And they are definitely kind of an enemies to lovers trope, the two of them. He doesn't think that she deserves to have a role this big. She's not really a serious actress. She just kind of fell into the role. She doesn't care if she gets fired because she has a life, whereas he needs the role. He needs to stay there. So if she ruins his gig, it's a big deal. I highly recommend, if you're into that sort of thing, the behind the scenes kind of how people would act if they hate the characters they're playing. The Spoiler Alert series by Olivia Dade. Plus, they're the heroes and the heroine, where the heroes are, they're definitely like leading men types. The heroines aren't. They are imperfect. They are not what people would think is the most beautiful woman ever. They're overweight. They're big. They're muscular. They're tomboys. That. So I like that it's not like the 5'4" waif.
Yeah.
As the main female character. It's very cool.
Good. Very nice. All right. I think we're down to our last. Lou, you want to give your final?
Well, when I did Tanya French, I had 2 books, so
okay.
I've burned through my last picks.
Okay, that's it. All right. Yep. All right. Oh. Karen, how about you?
Okay, I'll go with Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is one of those authors that has been around for a while, but she kind of broke out this last year. She had a book called Book Lovers, which made people go back and read her other books. She has had books called Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, The Love That Split the World, When the Sky Fell on Splendor. She's had a lot of really good books, and Book Lovers is just the one that I read this year from her. I did read Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation prior to this year. So I was in before she was cool. Let's put it that way.
Very nice.
Book Lovers is cool because it's kind of the two main characters had a meet cute, but they hate each other. And they're both kind of editors for different kinds of novels. They both work for publishing houses. She found a book that she took to him to try and see if he'd like to publish it. He dismissed her completely. He took his coffee and walked out, essentially. And they meet up again later in a small town. It's kind of, she goes there because it's the setting of one of the books that she loves. And it turns out that this guy is from this small town. And the reason they don't get along is because of how she waxes poetic about this town. And he realizes that it's not like that in the book. The town is nothing like what it's portrayed. And so they end up seeing from each other's perspective. Again, take a drink, apparently, because I like these kind of books where there's two different perspectives and they end up learning more about each other through those views, those opposing views. And I love the grumpy hero and the sunshiny heroine. They call it Grumpy Sunshine, which is weird, but it's also like enemies to lovers type book. Enemies to lovers, I think, is my favorite romance trope. I just love that sandpapery kind of relationship between the two. So book lovers, it's cool because it's relatable to people who love reading. They're both very voracious readers and they love the crafting of books. And also you get to see like the dynamic between the main character, the female main character, and her sister. And there's a lot of like super growth between the main characters. So again, it's right up my alley. It's called Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I recommend her books. Look through them and see what might float your boat, because there's a lot of different types of books that she's written.
Very nice. I will include all these on, and I'll send out a list. My last book is a nonfiction book. It is Blackout: Remembering the Things I Drank to Forget by Sarah Hepola. This is from several years ago. Sarah did a Texas Monthly podcast, The History of the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, which was a fascinating podcast about all the different rules that you had and how everyone wants to take claim for their success, because it kind of reminds me a little bit of, there is that wonderful documentary about Bill Finger, who was the unknown creator of Batman, and Bob Kane took all the credit, and Bill Finger did a lot of the stuff. Blackout: Remember Things I Drank to Forget is her story of her journey to sobriety. It is a funny book. She woke up one morning, the very beginning of the book, they talk about her friend says, do you think someone slipped you something? And she said, yes, someone slipped me 5 very dry gin martinis.
Very cool.
Yeah, she was lucky. I had her on the podcast. We ended up talking almost 2 hours. She does not think it was her story. I said, I think you were incredibly brave and threw back the curtain of all the things she did wrong. She did not think at all. She loved drinking, and she loved the way drinking made her feel till it stopped. And this is, I think it is a very funny, interesting story. I think whether you're into a sobriety or not, having someone share so much of themselves in an entertaining way is really well done. She is now in her late 30s, early 40s, and her next book is how she finds herself at this age, unmarried, no kids, and is not what she expected. She assumed that she would be. So she's a very good writer. I found the book fascinating. And if you want to, after checking out the book, you can do a Google search Set Listing Bruce and find her and hear her. She's just a fascinating character that I was really enjoyed having her share her story. And if you, I do recommend the podcast, even whether you're a sports fan or not. It is amazing, the stories of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader and how you sold sex, but at the same time you had to be a good girl.
Mhm.
And that dual thing that they were doing. I mean, you couldn't be seen drinking, you couldn't be seen smoking, you could not be seen on a date, but on a game day you had to give the come F me look.
Mhm.
And that dual reels a lot about it. So do that. All right, we went long. As we knew we would. For those of you behind the scenes, this is our second episode today, and we started at 10 and it's about 1:20. So thank you, Mr. Editor. You will have to play with this.
I was just thinking about putting this one up raw.
Yeah, you know what?
Sure.
I would. I think that's a great idea.
Because it's timely, and
yeah, I think so.
It was just a bunch of people hanging around talking about books. So
yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah. In fact, I would, we'll do that. Hey, just letting you know, this is fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. Because we're long, we're going to not go through our normal how to reach us. Please come back. We have Station 11 coming. We have English coming, and we're continuing our Babylon 5. And I hope all your readings in 2023 are good. Reach out to us on Goodreads and let's be friends. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Karen. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone. And long scene.
Yes. That was great, though.
Yeah.